He and Hank Jones pioneered the souvenir business that NASCAR has today. He was never comfortable carrying on a conversation for a long period of time.
He was the face of speed in real life, but the real shock came when Dale Earnhardt died in 2001. The racing world lost a legend. Fans mourned the Intimidator, but behind closed doors,
the sport lost Dale Earnhardt Sr. in that race. Looking back on that, what do you remember?
his family and closest friends were left with something even more personal: his private garage. Hidden from the public eye, it held more than just race cars. It was packed with rare vehicles, unfinished projects, and secret plans he never spoke about. Some cars had never been shown. Others weren't even street legal, but that was just the beginning.
He went and he hit with such force and it just stopped.
Inside glove boxes were handwritten notes, some for his children, some for charity, some that no one saw coming. What they uncovered wasn't just a garage, it was Dale's second world. This is the shocking truth about what they found in Dale Earnhardt's garage after his death, and why it left even his inner circle stunned. To the world, Dale Earnhardt was the black number 3, the fearless, hard-charging legend of NASCAR. He was bold, relentless, and forever linked to American stock car racing. On the track, he wasn't just a driver, he was a force. But behind the fame and the roar of engines was a man whose connection to cars went far beyond the speedway. In real life, Dale wasn't playing a role. He truly lived for racing, not just to win, but to build and to understand every part of what made a machine move. What many fans didn't know was that off the track, Dale had been quietly creating something few ever saw: his hidden collection. He wasn't flashy about it. He didn't invite film crews. He didn't post garage tours or brag about rare builds. This wasn't a showroom, it was a retreat, a vault of stories only he knew. At first glance, it looked like any other high-end car garage, but within seconds, it was clear. This wasn't a storage space. It was a fortress of secrets. Lined up wall to wall were more than 30 vehicles, many of which had never been shown to the public. No license plates and no racing history anyone could trace. Some had dust so thick it looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Others were sealed under covers with Dale's name handwritten on masking tape. Tucked near the back of the building was something that stopped everyone in their tracks: a blacked-out stock car with no markings at all. It looked like it had been built for speed, but also to stay invisible. When investigators looked closer, they realized this wasn't a race-used car. It was a prototype, something Dale had been developing behind closed doors. Beside it sat a Corvette ZR1, modified heavily with a stripped interior. Another car, an old Monte Carlo, had oversized rear suspension components never seen on anything Earnhardt had raced publicly. Some of the builds were clearly experimental, parts pulled from different decades, but the vehicles were just the surface. What they were sitting on top of was far more complicated. As they dug deeper into the inventory, something strange began to surface, and there were a series of blueprints and hand-signed planning documents marked Iron Heart. No one had heard of it publicly, but these papers told a story Dale had never shared. Iron Heart appeared to be a personal racing team Dale was building quietly, separate from DEI. The more pages they flipped through, the more questions they had. Why was Dale planning a whole new team outside his own company? Was he preparing to walk away from DEI entirely? Or was this his backup plan if his vision clashed with NASCAR leadership? The files didn't give all the answers, but they painted a picture of a man thinking 10 steps ahead and clearly keeping those steps private. Dale Earnhardt had built a fortress of performance, and the deeper they looked, the more it became clear. But what came next wasn't mechanical, it was human. Tucked inside glove boxes, center consoles, drawers, and even under floor mats were handwritten notes. These weren't public messages or scripted statements. They were personal. Inside a locked center console was something heavier, a letter to his youngest daughter, where he talked about missing time, wanting to build a father-daughter racing car, wondering if she'd want to get behind the wheel. At the end, it just said, "When you're ready, it's yours." No one had ever seen it, not even her. And perhaps the most personal item of all was stuck to the underside of a 1965 Impala's hood, neatly laminated and taped flat. It wasn't a tune list or build sheet. It was a photograph, a worn, slightly faded Polaroid of Dale as a teenager, standing beside his father Ralph's garage. These weren't decorations. They were echoes of a man who, behind all the fame and ferocity, never stopped being a builder, a father, and someone chasing meaning under the hood. Not every car in the garage was pristine. Some weren't even drivable. In a far corner, under a torn gray cover, sat a stripped-down Nova. No seats, no hood, and wires spilling from the firewall. Beside it, Dale's toolbox was still there. Drawers half open, sockets scattered, a grease rag crusted over the handle. It looked like he had just stepped away. Several cars were found mid-restoration. One classic 1969 Chevelle had a rebuilt block just sitting on a pallet nearby, tagged with Dale's notes about timing curves, piston choice, and camshaft options. Friends later shared how Dale would get lost in this garage. He didn't like assistants hovering. He didn't take calls. He'd spend hours underneath a car, grinding metal, tuning carburetors, soldering wires with steady hands and a silent focus. It wasn't about value. It was about the process, getting the sound just right, feeling the throttle response in his bones. And maybe that's what made this section of the garage the hardest to face. Because every unfinished build told the same silent truth. Dale had plans he never got to finish, engines that never fired, roads he never got to drive. For the people walking through that space, it wasn't just about cars left in pieces. It was about the future that went with them. Among the muscle cars, prototypes, and unfinished builds, there were a few vehicles that stood out. One of them was a heavily modified Monte Carlo with a special two-tone paint job and rally-style seats. Not a showpiece, but clean and track-ready. Another was an old Ford pickup with camo detailing and reinforced suspension, clearly built for rugged use. And perhaps the most emotional was a Chevy sedan with racing stripes. None of these cars were ever auctioned. There were no records of public sales, no follow-through on the plans Dale had mapped out, and after his death, the trail went cold. Some of the vehicles were moved, others vanished completely from inventory logs. Whether they were gifted privately, held back by the estate, or simply forgotten, remains a mystery. But one thing was clear: Dale Earnhardt didn't just build cars for himself. He was planning to use them to help others, quietly. And the fact that those plans were frozen in time, unfinished and unfulfilled, only made the discoveries much harder to process. After the shock wore off and the inventory was documented, reality started to settle in. And it wasn't pretty, because once lawyers got involved, Dale's private garage stopped being a sacred space and became a legal war zone. The question wasn't just who owned the cars. It was who had the right to claim anything at all. Many of the vehicles were never formally transferred into Dale's name. Others were tied to business entities he controlled, like Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, and there was no will explicitly dividing these specific assets. That opened the door to disputes. Cracks formed between Dale's widow, Teresa Earnhardt, and other members of the racing community, including some of his own family. In the years that followed, she went to court more than once to protect the Dale Earnhardt name, blocking merchandise, race team names, and even tribute builds that used his number. But behind the scenes, part of the fight was about the garage. Who had the right to the vehicles, the personal notes, the projects, and even the ideas Dale had never spoken publicly about. And the deeper the legal mess went, the more painful it became for Dale's fans and loved ones. Because the garage wasn't supposed to be a battlefield. It was supposed to be a place of memory, a place where every wrench, every note, every unfinished build still echoed with his presence. But instead of closure, the discovery opened up years of tension, and what started as a deeply personal space ended up tangled in courtrooms, with Dale's legacy caught between money, ownership, and silence. Toward the back of the garage, behind a row of covered cars and tool cabinets, there was one last space no one had touched, a tall metal storage locker. When it was finally opened, it didn't contain car parts or tools. It held something far more personal. Inside were cardboard boxes, carefully sealed. Inside those boxes were camcorder tapes. Some were filmed handheld. Others looked like Dale had set the camera up himself and spoke directly into the lens. No one outside the family has ever seen the full tapes. Some were so personal they've remained locked away, never to be shared. Others were copied and stored digitally, but not even close friends were allowed access. What was on those tapes wasn't made for the world. It was Dale, unfiltered, not the icon in the fire suit, just the man in a garage, surrounded by machines he loved and memories he couldn't explain to anyone else. That was the final message. Not a car, not a trophy, but a message that every project, every note, every unfinished engine wasn't built for fame. It was built for family. What they uncovered in Dale Earnhardt's private garage wasn't just shocking. It was deeply human. Behind the roar of engines and the spotlight of NASCAR, there was a side of Dale no one had truly seen. He wasn't building for show. He wasn't collecting for status. He was creating something personal. It was never meant to be a museum. It was his workshop, his retreat, a place where he didn't have to be the Intimidator. He left behind more than cars. He left behind a blueprint for the kind of man he wanted to be after the final lap. Someone who gave back and someone who believed the work wasn't finished until it meant something. And maybe that's the part no one expected. The biggest shock wasn't in the horsepower or the hidden prototypes. It was in the handwritten line, the untold plans, and the silent messages he left behind for the people he cared about most. Because what they found in Dale Earnhardt's garage wasn't just parts and projects, it was the truth, the one place he never hid who he really was. And maybe that's why this garage matters more than any win, any record, or any finish line. Now that story is finally being told. What happened to the cars Dale marked for charity that were never seen again? Were they given away quietly, or is someone still holding them in secret? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for further updates, and click the next video on screen now for another interesting story.